Welcome back to another FPL video and podcast. This will be the transfer tips for Double Gameweek 25, an updated version after what I discussed last week. We've had the Carabao Cup semi-finals take place. In the interim, we know the finalists, Liverpool and Newcastle, and that means Liverpool and Aston Villa will double in Gameweek 25, and they will definitely blank in Gameweek 29. So I'll be discussing some Double Gameweek players to consider, but also other single gameweek options that I haven't discussed in previous editions, which will be very useful, not just for the upcoming deadline, but also in the long term. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to over 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards new goals like 35 subscribers. If you haven't already, check out the chip strategy guide, which will be very helpful in determining the best time to use every single chip, all the ins and outs about how they all work, especially the assistant manager, just in case you're still a bit unfamiliar with the new booster. And there's also much more content like my transfer plans, and coming very soon will be the team selection video and a best wildcard team for Double Gameweek 25. And on Friday, there'll be a deadline stream. Not to mention use your fantasy content like the best team for matchday 9 with unlimited transfers, the team selection, and then a deadline stream on Tuesday. So there's a lot of content headed your way for both fantasy formats. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a single upload. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Before I delve into the 11 players and managers to buy, hold, sell and skip, these are my predictions for Double Gameweek 25. I've gone for Brighton 1, Chelsea 1. They played each other in the FA Cup and Brighton came out on top with a 2-1 victory, and Cole Palmer technically forced the own goal by Verbruggen. You could argue it was a bit unfortunate not to have that goal awarded to him, and he scored 4 goals in the reverse fixture in the Premier League in the first half as well, by the way. So Cole Palmer is still a nice captaincy option, as I'll show you very soon. Leicester 0, Arsenal 2, and Leicester were very hard done by in the FA Cup against Manchester United. They put up a very good fight and ultimately came up short. Aston Villa 3, Ipswich Town 1 is quite nailed on for me, I think, in terms of predictions. Normally, I hesitate between scorelines, but we'll see if I'm a man of my word in the deadline stream when I show you these predictions once more. I've also gone for Fulham 1, Nottingham Forest 2, and earlier this season, Fulham went to the City Ground and got a 1-0 victory. So this could be a very tight game and could go either way. A draw or a Fulham win is also possible, but I'm backing Forest at this moment in time. I've also gone for Manchester City 3, Newcastle 2, and this could be a basketball score or a tennis score. It could be a very high scoring draw or a narrow victory either way, but I'm currently edging towards Manchester City, who just about got the job done against Leyton Orient away from home in the FA Cup. And Newcastle also struggled against Birmingham City away from home, but they also got that victory out of the bag. I've also gone for Southampton 1, Bournemouth 4, who got an impressive 2-0 win at Goodison Park with some key players rested, and Semenyo took the penalty, which is very interesting. West Ham 2, Brentford 1. I think Graham Potter will continue a pretty decent, set of results, although you'd still expect a few more victories and a bigger managerial bounce, but I think Graham Potter is a decent manager, and Brentford really struggle away from home. Crystal Palace 1, Everton 1. It does seem like a low scoring draw for me, but Everton have been in brilliant form and Crystal Palace have been better in away matches compared to at Selhurst Park. And then I've gone for Liverpool 3, Wolves 0, a very standard Liverpool win. I'd be shocked if they struggled in this game. Tottenham Hotspur 2, Man United 2. This is one of the games I'm least sure about, and could we see a managerial change? This video is recorded before the FA Cup Sunday matches, so if Tottenham lose to Aston Villa and get knocked out of 2 cup competitions within the space of a few days, we could see Ange Postecoglou sacked with such a poor league standing as well, but it all depends on that potential managerial change. Otherwise, I think a 2-2 is a pretty decent prediction, and I've gone for Aston Villa 1, Liverpool 2. I'm backing the league leaders to win both matches in Double Gameweek 25, although last week I did predict them to draw against Everton. I'm a bit more confident now of Liverpool winning that game, but it's still going to be very tough because it's a Merseyside derby and it's the last one to be played at Goodison Park, of course, with their imminent stadium change. But let's also talk about other factors such as the top 10 captaincy options and the clean sheet odds. So this is according to DraftHam, by the way. Liverpool are top with that double game week. They've got a 50% and 47% chance of keeping a clean sheet in both matches respectively against Wolves at home and Aston Villa away. In terms of scoring over 2 goals, they're also top and they lead by some distance with 60% against Wolves and 27% at Villa Park. Arsenal are second despite not doubling, and they've got by far the highest chance of keeping a clean sheet in a single game week, with 78% against Leicester City and a 48% chance of scoring over 2 goals. Despite Martinelli's injury, he's going to miss the next 7 matches and over a month worth of football, and Arsenal down to the bare bones in multiple positions, but particularly in that forward line. Aston Villa are third with 45% and 18% chance of keeping a clean sheet, and it's not too different with over 2 goals actually, 44 and 11% respectively, against Ipswich Town at home and then Liverpool at home. Then we've got Bournemouth in fourth with that plum fixture away to Southampton. Manchester City are fifth despite facing a stern Newcastle side, and Chelsea complete this top 6 with 45% chance of keeping a clean sheet away to Brighton, which I don't necessarily agree with, and a 29% chance of scoring over 2 goals. The bottom team is actually Wolves in terms of a clean sheet chance, and Leicester City are second bottom. So let me know what you think of these provisional kind of percentages and stuff. They will change over the coming days, and Draft Hunt has been recommended on this channel on multiple occasions. And last but certainly not least is the captaincy rankings, which has no algorithm behind it. It's just my personal opinion. I've gone for Salah top. What a surprise there. He's basically been top since Game Week 10 with the captaincy dilemmas, and he's got that double against Wolves at home and Aston Villa away. You could argue this double game week is better on paper compared to double game week 24, but he's still got 16 points away from home against Bournemouth, who are one of the most informed sides in the country. Gakpo is second, and last week I was more leaning towards Trent Alexander-Arnold over Gakpo, with both games being away from home. But I think that Wolves at home fixture could lead to Gakpo having a huge return in that particular match. His record at Anfield is sensational, and we saw parts of it against Tottenham Hotspur in the Carabao Cup, where he scored a goal and linked up very well with Mohamed Salah. I've gone for Ollie Watkins in third, and if you actually look at number 3 and 4, both Watkins and Trent are injury doubts heading into double game week 25. Watkins misses the Tottenham Hotspur game in the FA Cup, but Unai Emery is hopeful that he returns next week and he's available for game week 25 against Ipswich Town at home. If that's the case, I think he's the third best captaincy option, only behind Salah and Gakpo. And Trent, we'll see if he plays in the Merseyside derby on Wednesday, but he missed the Thursday game against Tottenham Hotspur in that very comprehensive 4-0 win for Liverpool as they reached another Carabao Cup final. Cole Palmer is fifth, facing Brighton away. He's got a good record against them, particularly this season. Rodgers is actually sixth because of the double game week. I've gone for Van Dijk in seventh, and then Kluivert, Semenyo and Isak in the top 10. Manchester City are a big name. They've won everything in English football over the last couple of years, and they've arguably been the best Premier League side of all time. But I think Isak, with the form he's in, can really punish them. He also got a full rest in that 3-2 win against Birmingham in the FA Cup, and I think Isak is actually a pretty underrated captaincy option for double game week 25. But those are my rankings. Let me know if there are any other players you'd maybe include. It might be another Aston Villa player like Marcus Rashford if you want to take a punt, or perhaps another Liverpool player. Maybe it's time for Luis Diaz to finally deliver. He has been very underwhelming in the last couple of months. A few big returns here and there, but the consistency has been lacking. It's time to highlight 11 players to buy, hold, sell and skip, but I'm also including managers in today's video. But Cole Palmer is going to be a buy. A lot of people have sold him in recent weeks. You could argue he technically blanked in the FA Cup against Brighton, who he faces now in double game week 25, but he scored 4 goals against them at Stamford Bridge, and he's an underrated captaincy option. He's actually 5th in my rankings, as I just showed you, with 14 goals this season in the Premier League, 8 assists and 19 big chance created, which is the same as Saka, by the way, who has missed the last couple of weeks of football, and that's 173 FPL points for Cole Palmer. Only Mohamed Salah leads him in that metric, and I think Palmer is one of the only players you can really target for the captaincy and where you can go against Salah on several occasions. I wouldn't do so in Game Week 25 personally, especially Liverpool doubling, and they've got Wolves at home as part of that very appealing double game week. But in future, you look at Game Week 27 and 28, when Chelsea have Southampton and Leicester at home back-to-back, I think Cole Palmer could be a brilliant captaincy option there. But it's worth mentioning that Mohamed Salah faces Southampton at home in Game Week 28. But I'm looking at Game Week 27 there, and I think Palmer could be the best captaincy option in that particular game week. I think he's got everything there in terms of underlying stats, the consistency, the double-digit returns, and the high ceiling. Great fixtures overall. I would not be selling Cole Palmer. If you got Palmer, of course, I'd be looking to hold on to him, but I think he's closer to a buy than a sell. I've covered multiple Bournemouth players in the recent transfer tips videos, and I think Kirkes is another one who's worth purchasing. There are probably 5, maybe 6 Bournemouth players that are worth investment overall, but in terms of ranking them, I think Kluivert and Semenyo are the standouts. I think defensively, Howson and Kirkes offer the best value, and Danga Ouattara playing up front whilst Evanesson is out, which will probably be until March. That's also a great punt, and it offers tremendous value at 5.1 million. But I look at Kepa Arrizabalaga. I can understand why some of you are looking to invest in him, and he could be a decent long-term solution between the sticks, but I'd rather cover Bournemouth defensively with one of Kirkes or Howson. And if you look at bonus points, for example, I think Howson might be even better. He's also got the goal potential from set pieces. He's such a unit from these aerial situations. And Kirkes provides more attacking threat from open play. He's the more exciting pick, but also more expensive at 4.9 million. His ownership is slowly rising. It's currently 11.8%. 2 goals and 3 assists this season, but an expected assist figure of 1.75 and only 5 big chances created. No big chances for himself, an XG figure of 0.41. I just don't think these stats are particularly great. 22 key passes. He's a very good left back. He's going to have a lot of suitors in the summer, and I think Bournemouth are worth investing in defensively. They help you navigate blank Game Week 29 and future double game weeks where Bournemouth will likely double in either Game Week 33 or 36, and the next few games look very enticing, particularly Southampton away and Wolves at home. So Kirkes for me is a purchase, but I would argue that Howson offers better value. One of the key reasons why I activated the assistant manager in Game Week 24 was because I backed Liverpool to reach the Carabao Cup final, and have back-to-back double game weeks where you don't need to spend a transfer on changing your assistant manager. So Arne Slot is in place for myself, and if you are looking to use the assistant manager in Game Week 25, I'd rather go for Arne Slot than Unai Emery. I completely understand the temptation to chase table bonus, but I think Arne Slot just offers that guarantee of multiple victories, maybe a draw if worse comes to worse, and I don't see Liverpool losing many games this season, even in tough fixtures like Aston Villa away in Game Week 25. Now, it's difficult to kind of give stats for a manager, and FPL have shown the points since Game Week 23, so since that period, Arne Slot has 2 victories out of 2 games, with 6 goals scored, 1 clean sheet, and 20 FPL points overall. His ownership figure is 45.8%. Now, some of you might be confused about this ownership figure, saying, how do so many managers, or FPL managers should I say, have Arne Slot in their team? This percentage is only for those that have activated the assistant manager chip, so Arne Slot is almost half of those teams that have used the booster and is currently active. So that's the way it works. He is one of the most expensive in the game at 1.5 million in a select group with Maresca, Arteta, Guardiola, and Eddie Howe. And I think Arne Slot is the best option of the lot right now. And you might want to switch Slot to Arteta in Game Week 26 when Liverpool have that trip to Man City away. But there are no table bonus. It's still going to be a tough game to navigate, even though Liverpool would be favourites going to the Etihad. And ultimately, I think Arne Slot is really a purchase for Game Week 25 only. You also look at Newcastle at home in Game Week 27, and you could say the ceiling is quite low there, but Liverpool could win all of these games coming up. That is certainly possible. I think up until Game Week 28, I think Liverpool will drop points in 1, maybe 2 matches, but Southampton at home, of course, in Game Week 28 is pretty much a guaranteed victory. Just a matter of, do Liverpool keep a clean sheet? Do they score 4, 5 or 6 goals? Or maybe do they go a bit more conservative, rotate, and just win 2 or 3-0? But Arne Slot is a purchase, and I definitely recommend him over Unai Emery. Cody Gakpo has 4 goals across his last 4 matches across all competitions with an assist, and if you also count the penalty he won against Bournemouth, that makes it 2 FPL assists, so to speak. So Cody Gakpo has been in fine form. It was a slight regret of mine to sell him, but ultimately it opened the door to buy Arne Slot, and with those back-to-back double game weeks, I'm still fairly happy with my decision. I'm just hoping that Gakpo goes a bit quiet against Everton, but with the form he's in, I do see that being very difficult to achieve. But he has 8 goals this season, 4 assists, 15 bonus points, which is probably the best stat he has to offer. His underlying numbers aren't particularly great, and he's got 92 FPL points. It's only a matter of time before he reaches the 100 mark. I think by the Wolves fixture in Game Week 25, he will achieve that milestone. And his away record hasn't been great this season. He scored against West Ham, but that's about it in terms of his goals on his travels. But he did score against PSV, his former club, away from home in matchday 8 of the Champions League, and his home record is simply brilliant. So I honestly wouldn't mind Cody Gakpo. If you don't have him already, I think he's a good purchase for Game Week 25. He is second in terms of the captaincy rankings after all, but I definitely would prioritise Arne Slot as your assistant manager over Cody Gakpo, despite how good he's been playing recently. And in terms of stats, which I did mention briefly earlier, which aren't particularly great, 42 shots overall, 29 of them are inside the box. His XG is 5.3, 10 big chances, 7 big chance created. So they're pretty decent. They have been racking up in recent weeks, but I still think Gakpo will pale in comparison to other forwards, especially from other teams and looking at the long term. But if you are wildcarding right now, I think having Gakpo for Double Gameweek 25 is a great option. Then you can move him to Matheus Cunha or Chris Wood in the long term. Morgan Rogers scored a hat-trick in the Champions League against Celtic last time out, but he's been very frustrating in FPL with 3 consecutive yellow cards in the Premier League, and he's also got 6 yellow cards across his last 8 games across all competitions. You're kind of hoping he doesn't get a couple more because he's only 2 yellow cards away from suspension. The threshold has increased from 5 yellow cards to 10, and basically as long as Aston Villa have played their 32nd game, that's when the threshold increases once again to 15 yellow cards. But if Rodgers gets 2 yellow cards in that time frame, he will be suspended for 2 Premier League matches, and that's the major concern of Rodgers. He's more of a hold than a purchase, despite doubling in Game Week 25 and being quite high up in terms of my captaincy rankings. He did score in the reverse fixture against Ipswich Town, so he could do really well in that game, but the double game it comprises of the best team in the league in Liverpool, so I don't think Rodgers is that much of a buy. Instead, I'd recommend holding on to him, and if you are in the market for an Aston Villa player, Rodgers and Watkins would certainly appeal, but I would argue that Bournemouth midfielders like Kluivert and Semenyo are even better. I've recommended Jean-Philippe Mateta for over 6 game weeks now, and he has been simply brilliant in the last couple of matches, particularly away from home. He scored a brace at Old Trafford and gave Crystal Palace a famous victory at that stadium, but they've got a pretty good record against the Red Devils in recent seasons, to be fair, and their upcoming fixtures are still very strong, but Crystal Palace will likely blank in Game Week 29. Now, against Newcastle, of course, they've reached the Carabao Cup final. It makes sense for both teams to blank there, but if Crystal Palace and Newcastle fail to qualify for the FA Cup quarterfinals, there is a slim chance that their fixture in Game Week 29 stays in blank Game Week 29, and as a result, they wouldn't blank. But like I said, it's a slim chance. I discussed this in my chip strategy video, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. But Jean-Philippe Mateta and that fixture against Newcastle, that would certainly appeal for Double Game Week 33. That's the most likely scenario where we'll see Palace versus Newcastle kind of fall into. But for the time being, if you've got Mateta, he's a very easy hold. I wouldn't be selling him even to Cody Gakpo. I'm very bullish on for Double Game Week 25. I could see Mateta doing very well against the likes of Everton, Fulham, Aston Villa, and Ipswich Town. I think Fulham is probably the toughest fixture of the lot, especially when you kind of analyse their defences. But Mateta has 10 goals this season, 1 assist, 21 big chances, and over 100 FPL points, an XG figure of 9.91 and 21 key passes. I think Mateta is one of the best forwards in FPL right now, and I certainly would be selling him. For those looking to invest, he would make for a good purchase, even with blank Game Week 29 in mind. David Moyes is the highest scoring manager in FPL at this point. Of course, we've only had Game Week 23 and 24, and for those that are a bit confused about the kind of points we see on the FPL website, the chip has only been active or available since Game Week 24, but they have shown you the points from Game Week 23 as a kind of way of familiarising people with the point system, and Moyes has the most points in those 2 game weeks with 31 overall, that 1-0 away win against Brighton and demolishing Leicester City by a 4-0 scoreline, and it's Liverpool up next. If David Moyes can somehow do the unthinkable and beat Liverpool, that will be 16 points for a victory alone. Never mind the points for scoring a goal. It all depends on how many Everton score, of course, on Wednesday night, and maybe keeping a clean sheet, which gives you 2 additional points. So the ceiling with a David Moyes or these managers with table bonus and they're eligible at the beginning of the game week is so massive. And those that went for David Moyes, I think moving to Unai Emery in Game Week 25 makes a lot of sense. But despite how good David Moyes has been recently, I wouldn't be holding on to him against Crystal Palace and Man United because you're not going to get table bonus from either match. And I think Everton could lose both of them, particularly Crystal Palace away. Although, as I mentioned before, the Eagles have been stronger away from home compared to at Selhurst Park. But in the 2 game weeks we've kind of seen the points available for, that's 2 wins out of 2 for David Moyes, with 5 goals scored, 2 clean sheets, and 31 FPL points. But the ownership is dipping. It was around 30% when I created these graphics. It's now 28.9%, and it's going to go down even further by the time this video is published. So David Moyes for me is a sell. And it's also worth mentioning Mykolenko, because in this Everton section, that's going to be something a lot of people are wondering about. David Moyes said, when asked about Mykolenko's availability for the Merseyside derby, I need to wait and see. He felt his calf this morning, and we wanted to be a little bit careful today and decided not to take the risk with him. So Mykolenko missed the FA Cup game against Bournemouth, where they lost 2-0 at home. Hopefully he's available for Double Gameweek 24 and 25. Levi Colwill was fully rested in Chelsea's 2-1 defeat against Brighton, his former club, and he has made multiple errors in the last couple of matches where he has featured, like Manchester City in that 3-1 defeat and also in their 2-1 home win against West Ham. Colwill has 1 assist this season, no goals, 1 shot on target, and 49 FPL points. He's averaging 2.2 per match. It's simply not good enough. He's got 7 shots overall, 3 big chances, 2 big chance created, but this is a very simple one. Levi Colwill has low ownership for a reason. I've got him in my team. I can't wait to get rid of him. He's a very easy sell. The same goes for any Chelsea defender. Robert Sanchez in goal, who was dropped for Jorgensen in Game Week 24. I would completely avoid Chelsea defensively, despite some very appealing fixtures coming up, like Southampton and Leicester at home coming very soon. Now, I might end up keeping Colwill for the next couple of weeks because I've got other fires to put out, like Veltman, who is equally as bad as Colwill, but even he's got more bonus points and points per match than Levi Colwill. He is one of the worst defenders you can invest in, even with his cheap price tag at 4.4 million. So I'll keep this very short. I'd sell most Chelsea players except Cole Palmer, and maybe if you want to go there, you stick with another Chelsea attacker, but I think all of them are sellable. Bruno Fernandes provided a late winning assist for Harry Maguire against Leicester City. I think Fox's fans will be understandably very frustrated from those incidents towards the end of the game, but Fernandes got the assist nonetheless. He played very well in that FA Cup tie, and he's got some decent fixtures from an attacking perspective, particularly Tottenham and Ipswich Town over the next 3. You've also got Everton and Arsenal in there, who have been very solid defensively, and even under David Moyes, you've seen Everton keep clean sheets and look very resolute defensively. Fernandes has 5 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League this season, an XGI figure of 12.28, so you would expect a little bit more from him in terms of bonus points and some mega hauls in there, and he's been quite consistent since the dismissal of Erik ten Hag around Game Week 10. That's over 100 FPL points, but I don't think Bruno Fernandes is worth the money, and you can find better value elsewhere with the Bournemouth midfielders, which I've mentioned a lot in my recent videos. Even an Aston Villa midfielder for this week, although that's going to be very short term, to be honest. Anthony Gordon has been very consistent over the last 10 game weeks, although you probably wouldn't invest in him right now. But I think with Bruno Fernandes, if you got him, you could definitely make a case for holding on to him, but I think he's closer to a sell than a purchase or a hold at this moment in time. You just don't know what you're going to get from Manchester United, and they can sometimes lose against teams that they should be beating at Old Trafford. Their record under Ruben Amorim in that stadium has been horrendous, to say the least. So I personally think Bruno Fernandes is a sell. Amad Diallo is maybe closer to a hold because he's so cheap and he's an ideal 8th attacker. But with Bruno Fernandes, you'd be inclined to start him week in, week out, and you just can't trust Man United to that level. It might surprise you to hear that Kai Havertz is in the top 20 most transferred in players for Double Gameweek 25, but Arsenal have some great fixtures coming up, like Leicester City away and West Ham at home. But I don't trust any Arsenal attacker right now, and towards the beginning of the season, my policy was Bukayo Saka or nothing to cover that Arsenal attack. He is the only world-class attacker Arsenal have, and he's been a massive miss for the Gunners in the last couple of months. You couple that with Gabriel Martinelli, who's going to miss 7 matches and over a month worth of football. Gabriel Jesus, who suffered an ACL injury, he'll be out for 8 to 9 months. Arsenal are just down to the bare bones. The likes of Kai Havertz have been overplayed, and the other available forwards in Nwaneri, Sterling and Trossard, they should all be squad players at the very most. Nwaneri has a great future. He's been one of the shining lights for Arsenal this season, but if Arsenal were serious about competing on all fronts, they needed that investment in the summer on a forward or two at the very least, and in January they had another opportunity to rectify those mistakes, but they didn't do so, and they have paid the price, with Martinelli being injured just a day after the January transfer window closed. So I think Kai Havertz is a skip, unfortunately. If you do have him, you can definitely hold on to him for the next couple of weeks, but I'd rather go for Cody Gakpo for Double Gameweek 25, and it goes without saying that Ollie Watkins and Alexander Isak will be better options than Havertz, although both of them are more expensive. You also look at Jean-Philippe Mateta. He would be a more solid and consistent option than a Kai Havertz, not to mention Chris Wood, who has been arguably the best forward pound for pound this season. Matheus Cunha is a really good way of covering blank Gameweek 29, where Wolves will face Southampton by that stage, and they've got some good fixtures around Gameweek 27. So for me, Kai Havertz is a skip. If you went for David Moyes for Double Gameweek 24, moving to Unai Emery is a simple decision. It makes a lot of sense and it can really work for you, especially if you've got a triple up in Liverpool and you don't want to part ways with Trent if he's available for Double Gameweek 25, maybe Cody Gakpo, Van Dijk and all these other options like Konate who offer good value overall. And it goes without saying that Mohamed Salah is an excellent option that you shouldn't be selling anytime soon. But I think Arne Slot is a better option than Unai Emery, and I would back Liverpool to beat Aston Villa in Double Gameweek 25. But if I'm wrong and Aston Villa get a draw or a win, you get those table bonus from Unai Emery, and you would expect Villa to beat Ipswich Town at home in Gameweek 25 as well. Then it's Chelsea at home in Gameweek 26, but the only way you can get table bonus from that match is if Aston Villa have a horror show of a Double Gameweek 25 where they lose both matches and drop to 9th in the Premier League table. Now there is the possibility where they get a draw against one of Ipswich Town or Liverpool and they go down to 9th or 10th, and then they can get the table bonus against Chelsea, who currently sit in 4th in the Premier League table. And remember, with the table bonus, and it's all covered in my chip strategy guide, in terms of how you qualify, if you're eligible at the beginning of the game week and the opponent is 5 places or higher in the Premier League table, that means you will qualify for those table bonus. But I don't think that will be the case for Game Week 26, and ultimately Unai Emery is a 1 game week punt if you activate the chip in Game Week 24, and the same goes if you're using it right now in Game Week 25. But if that's your decision in terms of, am I going to activate the assistant manager in Game Week 25 or later in the season, my advice will be to save it for later in the campaign. If you want to see a new section in these Transfer Tips podcasts about a 1 week punt, then let me know down the comment section below. But for this week, it is Marcus Rashford. I'm not a big fan of Aston Villa assets beyond Double Gameweek 25, especially with their blank in Gameweek 29, which is why we've got the double in the first place, with that Liverpool fixture being brought forward. But let's not forget, this Double Gameweek involves having one of the best teams in the world being your opponent. Ipswich Town is still a very good fixture, and the likes of Rashford, maybe Rodgers and Watkins can be very enticing, but Rashford would only be a 1 week punt if you want to go differential. His ownership is 2.6%, with 4 Premier League goals this season, 1 assist, 15 key passes in around 15 appearances, and 54 FPL points. But the last 2 times Rashford started a Premier League game, he did very well. This was back in Game Week 12 and 13 when Ruben Amorim had his first few matches for Man United, and he scored the first goal, and it was in fact against Ipswich Town, his next opponent, and this time of course it will be for Aston Villa. He scored in the first minute of that game. It was a great start to the Ruben Amorim era, and it ended in a 1-1 draw afterwards. Then in that 4-0 win against Everton for Man United, Rashford scored a brace. So after that, it's very strange to see the kind of drop off in terms of minutes. He got axed from the squad, and now it looks like his future is elsewhere other than Man United. But I think Rashford is a nice 1 week punt here, and Unai Emery was very actually complimentary about Rashford, and of course it's kind of typical for a manager to back their own play and stuff like that, but he said that Rashford has been brilliant in training and has got a lot of potential to exploit. So let's see if Rashford can make things work at Aston Villa. You might sense this last chance saloon for him. The motivation might certainly be there, and a lot of reports indicate that Rashford has been on fire in training and shown a lot of motivation, but his underlying stats this season aren't particularly great. He's only played 15 games after all, with a lot of them coming off the bench. He's got 10 shots inside the box in 15 appearances, an XG figure of 1.61, 4 big chances, 4 big chance created, and an XA of 1.43. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and Rashford, of course, things went toxic with Man United towards the very end, but if Rashford can get into that purple patch, which we saw a couple of years ago, he could be a phenomenal FPL option. That concludes an extensive Transfer Tips podcast for Double Gameweek 25. There was an initial version which covered other players, mainly single game week options, of course, so be sure to check it out. and even a few Aston Villa assets that weren't discussed today were mentioned in detail in that particular podcast. And on screen, you can see the most transferred in players at this point of the game week. Not much has changed since last week. The same goes for the most transferred out players, and don't expect too much in terms of price changes or transfer activity until Friday, when we have that deadline, of course, for Double Gameweek 25, and I'll be streaming there as I usually do. And the same goes for UCL Fantasy on Tuesday. Be sure not to miss any of that content by smashing the like button of this video, getting it to the 200 likes, and subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell in the process. Our aim is to get to 32,000 subscribers very soon and push towards new goals in this calendar year. Follow me on X and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL and FPL Challenge Leagues, Spotify and Blue Sky can also be found in the description. Thank you very much for all your support in recent weeks. I'll see you very soon for more FPL and use fantasy content, which includes that deadline stream on Tuesday.